everybody. Welcome back to You Can't Win. This is Tom here, and I'm joined by Don as usual. Today we have for you returning guest Ed Buck. He's back, and we're going to be talking a little bit about the idea that the left is a pyramid scheme. This is something that I just came up with one day. I just said it. I don't know exactly what it means, but it seemed to resonate with Ed and Donald a little bit as well. I think he might feel a little bit more on the other side of things, but we'll just see how this goes and then probably answer some of your questions. So, Ed, what do you think? The left is a pyramid scheme. I've been calling it the Herbaleft.
Yeah, I like Herbaleft.
Yeah, you know, like a play on Herbalife. If you're not familiar with that, it's a pyramid scheme company.
Yeah, it's what's his name? Mikey Miles has a lot of experience with Herbalife because
really?
his obsession of the girl is used to work for Herbalife, and she tried to scam him, and he fell in love with her, and that's Mikey Miles' arc began at that point.
In Washington, when I used to live in Washington, the big thing for that was selling knives. I think it was Cutco knives, and that was like a door-to-door.
Oh, I get. I think Cumtown, or not Cumtown, one of the podcasts used to do a knives an ad read for for one of those things, clear scams, obvious scams.
Yeah, and so I had this roommate, and she was doing that to pay the bills. That was her job, mm-hmm. And she stopped paying rent after a while, and then we were like, you gotta pay up. You're past due. We can't cover for you and all this kind of stuff.
Oh, you didn't just murder your landlord. You didn't just not pay rent, go on rent strike immediately. Yeah,
no, we weren't that radical, I guess. But her solution was okay, well, I have a great opportunity for you. You want to buy some knives? I'm like, bitch, get out of here.
Should have scammed the landlord. Get the landlord in on the ground floor.
They probably are a bit too clever for that kind of thing, I guess. But
they, 3 parentheses. They, 3 parentheses.
But yeah, so what do you think? That you kind of felt like this resonated with you, like this made some sense. So the idea of the left being a pyramid scheme, being kind of a scam, you think that's true?
Yeah, I think so. I think that's true. I think that's true generally for political movements, is that they are always scams at the bottom. But I think for the left in the West, it's especially true. I'd like to clarify, I think, what's bad about whenever there is a leftist group breakdown, and I think there used to be a magazine called the Commune magazine, mm-hmm. and they broke down a week ago or 2 weeks ago. They always issue this post-mortem, they or the successor group kind of writes a little post-mortem message. And there's a whole genre of that because leftist organizations break apart weekly, and there's always
make a nice coffee table book,
Yeah, they should collect it because it's one of the funniest, some of the funniest stuff, especially if you're on the other side, if you kind of know what's going on. It's always put in these really high theoretical terms. Oh, there was this great disagreement with us over what Marxism actually meant or whatever. Yeah. And if you're on the other side, there are 2 reasons. One reason is sex. Someone had sex with someone and it went wrong. And the other reason is that mental illness. Those are the 2 nearly concentric circles for why left organizations actually break up. Those are the reasons.
The reason they start and the reason they end.
Yeah, those are that's the pulse that beats and the beats in the heart, and then that's why they break up. But the terms are always stated and at the highest level of abstraction. And invariably, the reason why organizations are stated, purported to end, is because of sectarianism or of cult mentality, cult of personality, always these theological terms. And I always had an issue with that because it's imprecise. I always had an issue with calling left organizations religious or in terms of sects or cultism. Mm-hmm. I always thought that's imprecise, and because it's always used in kind of a negative way, is that if you're a cultist, you're automatically a kind of a credulous person, a dummy. But the reason what's bad about cults, right, at the bottom, is that it's not that they provide metaphysical or theological explanations for, life. It's not that they provide some sort of like a theological underpinning for, your existence. It's that they scam you. It's that they take your money and they make you believe this stuff, right? So that they can like continuously sap your money, sap your time, have you like, get alienated from your friends and the family. That's really the reason, right? Like that's why cults are bad. That's why Scientology is bad. That's why the, allegedly Branch Davidians are bad, right? It's not that, it's not the explanation part. It's the scamming part. And that's also what's bad about like leftism generally, is that it's not that it like provides a kind of a political or whatever explanation for what's going on. It's that like in providing that explanation, it also usually directs you to a course of action that's like completely just false and just doesn't work. And then it saps your money and time and alienates you from people, and like in much the same way. So like the common denominator is not religion or cultism, which you guys I think will appreciate. But the common denominator is scamming. Like that's at the bottom of what's wrong.
I guess, yeah. Well, isn't the leadership though also like of these groups sacrificing a lot too in their own ways, kind of thing? You know what I mean? Like, isn't there some sort of irrational? Like, there has to be something irrational in keeping the movement going, even though you don't actually get huge benefits from it compared to, say, just getting a job or something like that too. You know what I mean? Like, there's not. It's like, I guess if that's like it's a pyramid scheme, there's kind of clear goals for that in terms of getting money, a huge amount of money by kind of roping other people in. But are the people at the top really getting huge benefits out of that? Do you know what I mean? Like, are they, or is it just like a sort of like a sad thing, kind of thing, like an irrational motive to create these little groups or something?
Yeah, I think you could probably say that leftism is probably a bad pyramid scheme too. Like it's not a good one. It's not an efficient one. It's not like a smart person. Although you could kind of talk about like, I think Scientology is kind of like that too. Like it's not that, like once you get up a level, right? Like up at the level of the pyramid, you don't win, right? You don't just get like everything. You just get like a little pieces, bits and pieces of the people below you. And it kind of becomes very predatory in that way, right? Like that's why it's similar. But you don't like, like even at the top level, I don't know if you're like free, like, or like, all the things.
Yeah.
You still have to buy into the internal rationality of it, right? Like you still have to be like, you can't be purely cynical. You are acting in bad faith usually, but you're not like a cynical liar, right? You don't really think of it.
I've always sort of thought that about like, like these like evangelical leaders who are like just clearly very cynical and just trying to like extract money from their flock and all that kind of stuff. Like there's that one guy who did the whole like blow this coronavirus away, that whole thing that kind of became a meme. Like that guy really seems like perfect representation of the kind of person I'm talking about. It just seems like it's like, yeah, they get a lot of money, they have like a personal jet, they live in a big house or whatever, but you still have to like put on this act all the time when you go outside. Like it seems like that kind of sucks. Like if you are working to acquire money, don't you want to be free to do what you want with that money? And like if you're kind of still trapped in playing this character that you don't really believe in, like that's got to be pretty miserable on some level,
Yeah, I think that's true. But also, like, I think that's true for pyramid schemes also. Like, if you're Bernie Madoff, you have to be Bernie Madoff, 24/7.
Yeah.
It's not that, you can't be like, oh, by the way, this is all false. Like, that's only for you. That's only, like, again, like, that's like you can't be purely cynical all the time, or things will kind of break down. Maybe if you're very talented and you're able to kind of really, like, split your ego or whatever. But I think you have to some extent, like, buy it. Right, like you have to kind of buy the lie, or the bad faith belief. I don't think that's a good distinction between those two things. I think the good distinction between those two things is that pyramid schemes are a lot more efficient. Like there's a lot more like people kind of figure out ways to get money out of people, and leftism is not as efficient. So it's like a lot worse in a way.
It's American ingenuity at work, I suppose.
Yeah, that's right.
I guess, yeah. Do you think that's an American left thing, or do you think that's just standard practice for all over the world? Or like, because I feel like the left has pretty specific goals in at least kind of economic terms or something, and so it's you're saying that it can't meet those goals. Is that like the you just can't ever meet those goals that they actually profess, or is it just you can't do it in the United States or something?
Yeah, so I would say like the definition of a scam or something is that you don't have these ex ante like knowable goals. Like you can't like, there are no like standards for assessing performance of the enterprise, right? That would be a scam because like if you can like only ex post can kind of assess what you did, right? Like if you invest money in a corporation or whatever, or in a fund, and they tell you, oh, we don't tell you like how much you can make or like what will be like a good performance, but ex post, like after everything happens, we'll tell you, oh yeah, that was a good investment or whatever. Or like we'll give you some money, but you don't know like ahead of time. You can't like estimate how much they'll give you or what they'll give you. So it's all like up to them. They get to shift the goalpost at the end.
Yeah, sure.
Like, so that to me, like, that's like a definition of a scam.
Yeah.
And like leftism, I think, going back to this, to what like the historian E.H. Carr said to like the New Left Review. It was like a big interview where he talks about if you want to live in good faith and you want to be a leftist he was talking about England, but I think it's fairly similar to America. You could do two things, right? There are two paths to live like authentic life. One life is that you join the mainstream party, which would be Labour in the UK, and you abandon any pretension of like working towards Marxism, like they use like this kind of obfuscating language, but they were talking about communism. You just abandon that pretense and, you work for the party or like you participate in party life and you like honestly undertake all the like responsibilities and duties of the party. And, you just become an activist, like an existing kind of position that you can take. The other path was to essentially disengage from public political life and take a kind of an unclavic strategy, right? Like kind of what Alistair McIntyre talks about at the end of After Virtue, is that you just kind of cultivate your own understanding of the world and practice, like a very authentic kind of, insofar as you can practice, but you don't engage with official politics. So those are the two paths to escape performative contradiction. Because if you try to do something else other than two things, you'll run against this like massive existing like forces that will, like crush you or force you again into a kind of an enclavic existence, or you get co-opted into joining them. And I think that's very applicable to America today. He was talking about, I think it's the interviews from like 70s or 60s, but I think it's very applicable today, is that the two paths are you join essentially groups that lobby the Democratic Party or provide like policy analysis for the Democratic Party or for Democratic candidates. Maybe you get like independent candidates, but people who are in essence Democrats like Bernie Sanders. Or you disengage from political life. And I think left organizations in the United States are trying to, in bad faith, they're trying to act as this like middle path, is that we're not being co-opted or we're not like participating in the mainstream political life, but we're also, not like locked in an enclave. We're not just like completely disengaged from politics and just working on our own understanding of the world or on our own kind of small experiments with like future society or whatever. You're trying to do both. You're trying to sit in between the two seats.
Yeah, I mean, I think that interview, I always thought it was Hobsbawm, but you're saying it's E.H. Carr.
I think it's E.H. Carr.
Yeah, and
Hobsbawm, I think, was more, I think, if there is like a similar one, Hobsbawm, I think, was more open to like political action generally.
Yeah, I thought, because I thought originally it was about the Blair years, but that's why anyways, I might have got it confused, but I remember the interview you're talking about though, and it's like comparing it almost to the Dark Ages or something, and like the small monastic communities keeping the flame going or something.
Yeah.
Or just joining the general run of society and just doing what you can in that situation. I think that's true. I think I don't know. I feel part of it though is also like individual political experience of not knowing the history of these movements and stuff, and then kind of getting involved in them and learning the hard way kind of thing, So there's people that kind of, I guess that's true for any sort of scam too, is that you get kind of drawn into a movement and you don't know why other people have left really, or you don't buy it kind of at some level. At some level you go, oh, those are, that was a cult, that was a mistake or something, but, we're somehow immunized from that or something. So I don't know. I think, but I feel like there's still some like, I don't know, like goal or like referent or something like that, like that there's still something that it actually applies to in terms of achieving the left goals. So, I wish that there was some middle path or something like that, right? Like I do wish that there was some way that you could kind of square that circle and get left movement going that wasn't just, destined to hit a blender at the end of the day. Because it's like, I don't know. I feel like there's something underpinning it that is like, it's not completely a scam. There's some goal that you could, actually meet one day or something in terms of a more egalitarian society or something. So, yeah.
I think so. I think like romantically, if you think of it, like Max Horkheimer used to have a quote that was like, I might be like misquoting all these people. This might be not Max Horkheimer, but I think Max Horkheimer used to have a quote about like, political action like generally seems impossible, and like if you look at history, it seems even more impossible. It just looks so remote that we'll achieve success. But it's important to like keep the faith that it might achieve success someday, like even if it's unrealistic. And that's like in the process of developing hope or like developing this, like keeping the flame going, you are like creating the possible like conditions for the future. So like I'm not disputing that like romantically or again like in a kind of a very long-term way you can, right? Like you can keep faith for like the third way, for like the way between the two possible paths. But I posit that, the existing alternatives do not achieve anything like that. And I think importantly to distinguish yourself, again, like all the scams also give you like this like kind of faith that, you can win. But you can win, but they have to kind of substantiate it by giving you not just long-term kind of in some distant future you will achieve your goals. They have to give you ex ante standards for how you're like on the path to achieving your goal. So, today we talk to like 50 people, we canvass this neighborhood, and tomorrow we'll canvass, this other neighborhood. And eventually we're moving towards socialism in some way, I guess, is the DSA model. But they're not, right? Like that's not really what's happening. They're not moving anywhere closer. They had 2 failed presidential campaigns. What was very funny about the Bernie Sanders campaign was that like they were talking about like when they got the Jesse Jackson endorsement, they were like, oh yeah, Jesse Jackson is the model. And Jesse Jackson lost twice, right? That was his contribution to history, is that he lost in 84 and he lost in 88. And in both of those years, the Democrat candidate like got smashed by the Republican candidate. And there was no like, I don't know, like there's just so intangible in terms of benefits. Like if ex ante you said like, what are the goals? What are the tangible achievements that this brought? Ex ante, like not ex post, because ex post you can always kind of find here and there. Oh yeah, they elected AOC or whatever. You can't, like there's nothing that you could have said like ahead of time that would be like, oh yeah, this is like moving us tangibly towards socialism. Like meeting these guidelines would have done it. Again, like if you treat it like as a fund, right? Like as an investment fund, right? What's your return on investment? What's your like how much can you return on average, right? Or in a good year and a bad year, like give us the median like amount that you will be able to return. And if you look at how much time and effort is spent on this, it's just the return is like on average almost zero, right? Like it's like non-existent.
Yeah, I mean, for the people at large, yeah. But then there are some people that make basically a career out of it, and it's all then about not so much the goals, but just like keeping the movement going. So then these like kind of like little, just the fact of like, oh, we got this many people involved, this many people signed up for the newsletter, we raised this much money. That's a success for them, even if there's no political gain it's good for them because now their kind of like career is moving forward. They're, that kind of thing. And that's what I kind of mean when I talk about the Herbaleft, although I would also extend that to just very broadly, essentially to like the entire left of the United States and even the West. I'm not so, I'm not so informed about like the European left exactly, but I imagine it's pretty similar.
I think like a lot of European left has a legacy of social democratic like success, but even for them, I think today it's so like the goals again that they set in the 19th century squared against the reality today. I think that would be pretty harsh, like reckoning with it. Yeah. But yeah, like that's the aspect of the pyramid scheme is that people at the bottom don't get anything. You don't get your Medicare for all. You don't get your student debt paid off. You don't get your like credit card debt paid off. You didn't get any of the goals that you set up for. Again, if you look at the Bernie Sanders campaign, these were the goals, the policy goals. And what you got instead is Joe Biden, who hates all those things, right? Like you got the worst possible thing. I don't know. It just seems like a bad investment. Like if I was investing money, I wouldn't invest it in this enterprise. I would invest it in Donald Trump, who seems like a very good investment.
Or Zoom stock.
Oh yeah. I was looking at the election analysis for like Hillary for dollars. Like there's a guy, a political scientist who like does like how much money was spent in what regions per like vote earned. So like you would look at like how much like Hillary spent money in like California, in New York City, and how many votes she got. And I think she like outspent Trump per vote she got by like something like 3-1. Like she like overpaid for the votes she got, and she got the votes in the wrong places. So if you look at that again, if you looked at that as like as an investment enterprise, you'd see it like, oh, that was like a mistake. That was a complete like insane error. And I think in the same way, like a lot of the stuff about like how much money Bernie raised, he raised a lot of money. Right? Like, he raised a ton of money.
Like 180 million, I think.
Yeah, like hundreds of millions of dollars from small donors, like all that stuff that you saw like 50 fucking times a day. Oh yeah, $27 average donation. You just look at that and go, okay, that's that didn't do anything. That's just like that's money like sunk into nothing. And another thing I see is that like I see that like the Medium post and like a lot of people keep asking like Biden supporters about, well, are you phone calling? Are you phone banking for Biden? You must have seen that, right?
I haven't actually, no.
Yeah, there's like a guy who like to ask like, or like there's like a gang of people who kind of ask every time there's like a big prominent Biden supporter, they ask them how much time they spend like on phone banking for him, or how much time they spend volunteering, because a lot of Bernie supporters would volunteer. Like a lot of the like like Chapo supporters, and like they would go like I think Red Scare also went into like New Hampshire. They like traveled with a campaign. And they would like go door to door. Jake Flores did. But like a lot of those people would be like, well, why aren't you like volunteering your time? But the thing is that like the model where like a lot of people like the grassroots campaign would go out door to door or phone bank or like text message people. That was the model of the Bernie campaign, that they would just be able to kind of jump over the institutions of the Democratic Party and reach the people directly. And that just failed. That just like failed completely. It just didn't work. It didn't bring out the people that they needed. Didn't reach the demographics that they needed. But they keep like hammering that, like, oh yeah, he got a lot of small donations. Oh yeah, he got a lot of volunteers. But that doesn't work. That didn't work against Biden. And they're trying to get like Biden to do that. But why would he need to do that? Like he doesn't. His whole experience is that you don't need to do that. You just need like to be on TV all the time because you're stupid.
I think that the underlying thing there is that they don't see the excitement for Biden that they think is needed to deliver a victory, but it's not necessarily the case that, as you said, that you don't necessarily need to be excited about him for him to win.
So, no, yeah, like that's just false. Like the whole idea, the whole like electoral path for Bernie was that he like invigorated the young people so they will turn out in numbers that they haven't ever before. Right, and every single, like even the contest that he won, that wasn't the case. He didn't like bring out like extraordinary numbers of young people, and like that's like a similar thing happened in Britain. Is that like they thought like momentum thought that we'll be able to bring out like, like hundreds and thousands of younger people that never voted before, like people who are alienated, people who don't really feel like they're participating in the process. And that just never worked. It just doesn't work. It's just like, it was just like a false idea and they implemented it badly, maybe. But like, it's just like, if elections provide any sort of like statements about what the broad segments of electorate and how they're feeling, which they probably don't, but if they do, that was falsified by these losses, these like crushing just defeats. And I think this is also falsified in America, is that like, it's just, young people don't turn out, the working people don't turn out. Well, who turns out? Older people who vote anyway, and they turn out against you, like they don't like you.
Yeah. So there's been a common refrain to refer to like right-wing grifters and that kind of thing.
Mm-hmm.
And I think there's a lot of truth to that. There are definitely a lot of people that are kind of running that scam, and it's very similar to what we've been talking about here. But
I think it's very self-conscious. I think a lot of like right-wingers,
yeah,
right? Like, I don't know. I think you used to follow Cantbot, and I think he kind
I
of
still follow him.
Yeah, he's still good. I like him, but he is like, I think, very much in a kind of, I think he's very much looking at leftists like Chapo and that kind of thing, and he's trying to emulate that. He's trying to make himself like, make money off of this, which
and
you can,
and even crossover. Like I think
he's
trying to
he's a big fan. He might be joining like Red Scare or like whatever. Like he might be switching over, because I don't think he was ever like committed to or a Trump or whatever. But like Trump re-election. But like a lot of those like kind of right-wing figures are very self-consciously like seeing themselves as like selling stuff and trying to get as much as possible. Someone like Baked Alaska, who I think used to be like a Black Lives Matter kind of protest guy.
Yeah.
In when that was big. I remember when that was big. That was cool. Remember Sean King?
Do they still matter? I don't know. Kind of.
No, I mean, I think Sean King's life matters. But like, yeah, like people like that are, to me, like very much mercenary mentality. They could switch like tomorrow. Sean King could switch tomorrow, become a black Republican, and earn a lot of money that way.
Yeah, and it's very easy to make those narratives. You just have one little key issue that's like, oh, I've been betrayed by the movement, and now I can kind of do like this tell-all thing where it's like, this is what they're really like, this is what they're really about. They don't really care about whatever demographic you're representing and what you're trying to like, what you're running your grift on a certain kind of feeling or whatever. You just kind of channel it in this other direction. Yeah, like it is easy. And the problem is, right, like people apportion blame in the weird way. Like the problem isn't them, like the problem isn't Sean King, right? He's not the problem anywhere. The problem is you, like people who actually like buy it and react to it and like promote it. Like the problem is like the suckers. That's like that's the people who are played, people who get scammed. Like there's always going to be like a class of people who are like predatory, or who kind of can sniff out when there is a money to be gained, merchandise to be sold, and that's never going away. But the people who kind of go along with it, that's like really what fuels it. In my opinion. They're not making you pay up,
Yeah, like there's a kind of a. That's also, I think, what's wrong with like abuse, the language of abuse, is that what's wrong with it again is not that it's like the way like a child gets abused or a child gets mistreated. What's wrong with it is that people get into scams. There are people who are more charismatic or more like predatory, and they're able to take advantage of weaker people or more kind of gullible people or less protected people. And that's what's wrong with it. That's really like the heart of it, is that these are scam artists. And it's really bad. It sucks, but it's not just the fault of like the existence of these predators. It's also the fault of people who are gullible. Like there's a moral kind of, there's moral apportionment that's missing, I think.
What do you think, Don?
Well, I'm thinking, like, do you think that this is sort of like structured around ideology for any kind of ideology? Like you can kind of get this scam, where predators kind of float to the top within it. Because I keep thinking when you're talking about this kind of stuff too, about like even just criticisms that I hear all the time about religion or something, about Catholicism in the same way, where if you're saying
because I mentioned abuse.
Well, that's part of it. I mean, it is one of those things where you kind of think to yourself, well, because that's the straightforward sort of atheist view on most religions anyways, is that there's somehow just scams that, like the idea that the Vatican has all this money that it just farms up from people, and there's no actual referent, there's no actual religion underneath it. It's just a whole, network of scams all the way down kind of thing. And then, in the same, you could say that about any other kind of organized religion. That's, you got all the people that say, I'm not a member of an organized religion, but I'm spiritual and all that kind of stuff. So I think that that thinking goes a lot, this idea that, it goes a lot deeper than just, the left or whatever too in that way. So I'm not sure.
Yeah, I think there is some truth to that. Like, it's true about the right, the left, and religion, and all. I mean, you can look at like any kind of collective human endeavor and kind of make this analysis, I think. And I think there's truth to it to an extent. You have to kind of consider what the exact goals and what people are getting out of it. So if you're talking about politics, really politics is it's about like achieving material gains and like making change, really, so that needs to be what's put under the the microscope. When you're talking about something like religion, I don't think people are so concerned like, oh, I gave my money and it didn't like materialize in some sort of way, like when people are when they're participating in a religious institution in some way, they are in an ideal world, they're benefiting from it in like a spiritual sense, or they gain something from it, even if you just follow the money and you're like, oh, look, these people give money to a church and then that church spends it on what they want, and the people don't get any of that, necessarily any of that money. They don't see it in their community or whatever. But that's not what they're giving their money for. And I think you need to, when you're making that analysis, you can't just kind of cast it very broadly without consideration of that kind of thing.
My retort to that is that I think a lot of like leftist organizations would essentially respond the way you responded to like accusations of like scams on the part of religion, is that they would say, what you get actually is like this feeling of solidarity. I think like
sure,
like
yeah.
Enzo like Traverso, like kind of, or similar kind of books of like you are in a fused organization that kind of has goals, has kind of romantic kind of ideals about life. You're surrounded by like-minded people doing what you like, and you get like a metaphysical satisfaction of like of
I don't think there's anything wrong with that. I think that if that's what you're in it for, that's great.
I think maybe there's nothing wrong with it, but I think there is again, like leftism is not religion, and also I think for religion there might be like a fundamental divide between people of like there are like scammers and there are people who get scammed. Is that like you do have misuse of funds all the time, and you have abuse all the time, and it does seem to crop up all the time whenever you have like a complex organization, and doesn't seem like it's like confined to anything. I don't think that's a claim I'm making, but I think I'm making the claim that religion or leftism in particular is like there's just nothing that you get back. There's just very, very little. And again, the stated goals at the beginning, right? The goals that religion states at the beginning are that you will be satisfied metaphysically primarily, whereas leftism promises that there will be an election, or at some point these policies will get implemented. There will be a concrete change in society, and that just is not happening. I just don't see it, and it's just getting more and more, and it is just like a drain of money, drain on hours, tons of volunteer hours, especially like canvassing. I think is like kind of just completely useless, but like organizing, that's a word I just hate. I just despise organizing, and I don't get it. I don't get what it is. I understand what like a union organizer does in a workplace, like when you get like deployed to like organize a floor, but I don't know what an organizer does. I don't get it. They just talk to people and nothing happens. NGOs generally, I don't know what they're doing. It's just like not doing anything. It's just doing these like little lobbying things. And whenever they talk about organizing the grassroots, to me that always sounds like, you gotta grab your wallet when someone says, oh yeah, we're organizing the grassroots, we are, engaging mass action with community. That's always like, watch out. That's what I think. Like if Sean King used to have this thing where like he would climb a mountain and like he would get paid for everything, like something like a weird scam where like he'd get paid to climb mountains because that was like a journey that he was on, and that was like a GoFundMe he did, and he never climbed any mountains.
Yeah.
It was just like, that's the type of person I think that kind of comes out of organizing background, and that kind of sees the moment, really like played it for all it's worth, and now is like very respected and established and very like big in the Bernie campaign.
Right.
He was like very central to their press outreach. So
I love that whole mountain climbing scam because people are mad that he didn't climb a mountain, as if like that was the point. Like, what did you care if he climbed it or not? Aren't you giving money to this idea that he's like giving the money to like a good cause? Like, if he didn't do that, then obviously that's a problem. But if he just didn't climb the mountain, like, who cares? Like, let him relax. Like, who cares about that?
No, I mean, like, it was just so obvious that these people are dummies and they're being played, right? That's the thing. And it's just like so like naked. Like with Sean King, it's so naked that he does that. But I mean, like, again, like he's able to just walk into the Bernie campaign, become their like spokesperson or whatever, just constantly in the news. Why? Like, why is that allowed? He's like, again, like as someone with that background should not be able to, but he is. And that's because it's the same thing. What he used to do for, stealing people's like videos and photos for Black Lives Matter without ever having been there, he does for Bernie Sanders. Right? And it didn't work then, and it didn't work now. But it did make him like, much better off than before. So
yeah,
I don't know. To me, that's like, he is like a symbol of a lot of that stuff. Like he is the most kind of clear and obvious symptom of the problem, and until he is like, people like him are just completely gone, I don't see how you can win. Like I just don't see how you can ever achieve anything.
I wonder what you mean by people like him need to be gone, but we'll leave that for another episode.
I mean half blacks, light skins is what I mean, non-FBA.
Yeah, so it's that contrast between the no achievement of actual goals plus the high value of self in terms of we're the ones changing everything, plus the negative view of everyone else as if they're all incredibly corrupt, plus the already track record of not achieving things even before that of the left. It just kind of it really does create like a, I don't know, toxic sort of soup of just not positive outcomes. But I mean, the easiest thing for me to get over that is usually to then look at what the alternatives on offer are other than not getting involved or something like that. Do you know what I mean? Like, I just feel like there's so much I don't know, like it's not like it's doing that well hot outside of the left too. It's just that it just seems like a terrible state of society in general. I don't know. So
it does seem like, yeah, you're right. Yeah. But like I feel like someone like Neera Tanden, who just got coronavirus, so very sad, very sad. Would be tragedy if she died. But she lives a very like is living in good faith. Like she is just not lying to herself. She knows what she's for. She says what she means, and she means what she says. Like that's the authentic living. She's living an authentic life. And I can't say that for anyone on like the engaged left. Like they're not living an authentic life. They're lying to themselves.
She's a true Heideggerian.
Oh yeah, that's right. She's very resolute and aware, But again, like that's like people like that who are just hacks, right? And also on the left, people who are like Sean King, they are living probably authentically in a way, like because they're cynical probably, and if they're not, they're dummies. But most of them I think are cynical. But people on the bottom, right, on the bottom layers of the pyramid, they are just played, And to like defend the pyramid above them, they do live in bad faith. They don't believe that this will work. And if they do believe, then they are dummies. And that's just, not happening. It's just not.
Well, I've got a little theory for you. What if we organize all these people who are getting played and develop some sort of party model that would represent them politically, and then they could overthrow the pyramid and then take over society and run it for themselves?
Yeah, that works really well. Also, like whenever people entry and try to, we'll organize it from the inside. That also never works. Usually people are more committed to the pyramid than they're committed to like, oh no, this is a scam. I'm not in a scam. I'm in a, Scientology is true. Like it's just, what are you talking about? Like it's not gonna work. Like the whole pyramid stands on the foundation of having to introduce you, like having to like keep you in the pyramid. It doesn't. Otherwise, it would just fall apart every time. So.
Right, you got to buy in at some level, and then to get people out of it, you got to give them something that kind of so they can cash out, right? Like they're not going to just disinvest because you convince them of something.
But I do want to like highlight again, like it's not like religion or like MAGA. Like it doesn't actually win. That's the point. Is that like it's worse than all of these things. It's even worse than like Madoff scam, in that there are like structural reasons for why it can't win. Like it just cannot. It just will not win because of like it's just there's just so little like supporting it, helping it. There's so little like desire on the rest of the American populace to do it. It's just so hobbled from the beginning that it's like a pure scam in that it's like there's just nothing coming out of it.
Yeah. What do you guys think about this idea? I sort of have this suspicion that we are seeing. You know how the whole Bernie campaign and people kind of in that circle of things, like you were talking about, Ed, that they're not going the traditional Democratic Party way of like getting in touch with like these different cultural and social institutions and building coalitions and that kind of thing, and that they're instead kind of making like this mass movement and stuff. I think that's kind of bullshit. I think they are actually pursuing the Democratic Party model instead, and they're building this kind of like left. The guys at the Good Old Boys podcast, shout out to them. They like to talk about this idea of like the patronage network, and that's the way that politics really runs in the country. And I think instead of like, oh, we're doing this mass network or this mass politics kind of stuff, I think they're actually building their own patronage network that is like, capital T, capital L, the left, trademark, that kind of thing. Like it's the left institution, and it will represent that in that like people who like things that are on the left, people that like this idea, they want to be associated with it. They'll give their time and money to it. But in the end, it's really just kind of funneling back into like the kind of cesspool in Washington, D.C.
The swamp.
The swamp, yeah. We got to drain it, folks.
Right. That's why we need Trump 2020.
Yeah, I mean, I'm not fully convinced that that's the case entirely, but I just have this sneaking suspicion that that's ultimately what's happening here.
Yeah, it's hard to look at someone like AOC and not feel that kind of thing, like
right.
Like that there is, and that yeah, like that. I think that would also, I mean, that does, the sort of scam theory does solve some of the problems around that too, in terms of, it's not the fact that she gets elected with DSA support and then somehow changes because she gets to Washington. It's more that they're trying to build this patronage network that she's part of or something, within the left. And she's doing exactly what is expected of her in that role or something like that too, where she's, building up her own fundraising campaigns and, has millions of people following her online and all that kind of thing. So, yeah, I mean, it's tough to see, I guess, at some level, but yeah, it's true, I guess. So, yeah.
I mean, I totally agree that that's what's going on. I think there's like I don't want to say like the big left, right? Like the big oil.
The evil left.
The evil left. The evil left won. Like the evil left killed him. But the evil left, I think, is a thing that exists, and they are able to they're very small, obviously. They're kind of laughable compared to everything else. But, they're sizable, and their like whole goal. I think the people that are involved in Bernie campaign, their whole goal was not really to win. Maybe winning was like a major goal, but their ex ante goal was like they'd be able to get like patronage or a seat at the table, like some sort of like being able to influence policy, produce like get politicians on their side. So they're not losing. They're not the suckers. The suckers are people who have no health care, who are like dying, who are right now without jobs or in really unsafe jobs, who have to go out in COVID-19 and get infected and their families get infected. Those are the people that are like played. But the people above them, I think, are very much like they have very clear plans of what they're going to do. They're going to get careers in Washington, D.C. or in like, around local politicians. And, there'd be in that organizer network of like, oh, I organize. I work in campaigns. I work in NGOs. I write policy stuff. Like, hey, it'll be fine.
Yeah. I mean, you got to remember, Obama started out as a community organizer. That was his like thing when he was starting out in Chicago. Oh
yeah, that's right. Like, after he was the Harvard Law School editor-in-chief of the Harvard Law Review, he was an organizer. Yeah, I love that. No, like that's the cesspool though. Like that he like came into this network of organizers, which is where AOC is from, which is where like Julia Salazar is from.
Yeah,
I don't think
JFK
that's actually
intern or whatever. Not JFK, but Ted Kennedy.
No, it was Leahy, wasn't it?
I don't know. One of those.
AOC was Ted Kennedy intern.
Ted Kennedy. All right. Yeah. So like one of those, like she was not like a bartender, like a plucky little, that Don kind of has a tweet about that, but like that's not what she was, and that's not what these people are. Like they're not, your friends, your buddies. They just want to get in there. I don't know. Joshua for Congress. Remember Joshua for Congress from 2 weeks ago?
Yeah.
That guy is like, that's also how it works, right? Like you just like take money, do with it whatever you want. There are no like controls on you. No one like establishes evaluations of like, you promised to run on a Democratic Party platform. You failed, therefore we won't like put money in anymore. He can just be like, oh yeah, like I'm not a Democrat anymore.
Right. And you see people defending him. Like, oh, he needs his space. Like, stop criticizing it. This is abuse. All that kind of language that you were talking about. That's being used to kind of defend the little... He's very small-time pyramid, but, like, that's how it works. Like, there's the big guys at the top, and it kind of trickles down. And then as it gets bigger, you see more and more of these people. They work on a smaller scale, but it kind of continues to grow like that.
Yeah, the $400, like, keyboard and the...
Yeah.
Carter for vagina. That guy. He's like, like that's how it works, right? Like these are small time. They're small time today. Sean King was small time in 2014, but he's very big time today, right? Like it's just you can win. Like you can win if you're smart, right? If you know that other people are suckers, then you can win. But you can't win if you think like if you want to be like pure at heart and if you want to help a grandpa get Medicare for all.
So let's get into the questions here. So first one, I thought this one was really important, so I'm glad you're here to answer this, Ed. Hi honey, I'm so horny right now. Ready for sex chat? Just find me on www.shots.fun.
Shots.fun?
Or Shats. It's like I kind of don't want to spell it out so people don't go there, but
Okay, that sounds intriguing. Let's go. I do want to talk to a honey from shots.com.
Yeah, I mean, Ramadan did just end, but I still don't think I'm going to be going to anything like that.
The boys are not back in town. The boys are not back in town after Ramadan.
No. Maybe we could take the podcast that direction. We could get like Howard Stern style.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. Now that we just took a big shit on the whole idea of like leftist politics, we gotta pivot somehow.
Pivot, yeah. Fill the room with prostitutes or something like that. Yeah, just
get the OnlyFans women, get them in.
Yeah.
I'll try to give them dawa, make them say the shahada after they ride the Sibian.
That's right.
Okay, this is a question for Donald. As the Ukrainian on the pod, is Cossack a slur? I guess this could kind of also apply to you, Ed.
Sort of. I'll let Donald answer, but I have thoughts.
think that my mom said that my like great grandfather was supposed to be one or something. I don't know. I don't know anything about this kind of stuff. I actually know very little about Ukraine, but I know that that's where my family comes from. That's about it. But yeah. So no, I don't think it's a slur. I think it's a glorious tradition. So.
Did he have the hair? Did he have just like everything shaved except one braid?
Oh no, I don't think so. No, I don't know. I've only seen him. I think he had like a hat or something on. There's like a photo of or like a painting or I don't know something. Whatever. This is like reaching back into my mind 20 years ago or something into stuff that I'm trying to remember. But yeah, I don't know. I think that I'm not sure of him exactly, but I think he was like in some sort of military thing or something or armed unit or something. I don't know. So yeah.
Yeah, I think there is like an etymology of it too. You know, some like people in you know, Central Asian kind of etymologists, which is people kind of just drawing random connections. They kind of connected to Kazakhstan or whatever. Like they connected to like countries like that because it was like they were called like Kazakhs or Kipchaks because they were on horseback. But I feel like it's dubious. I don't think it's actually the connection. It might just be like a word they use for them, like kind of, because it doesn't actually have a very clear etymology. It's not a word in Ukrainian or Russian. But sadly,
It's kind of like the Louis C.K. theory on
Oh,
how the
yeah,
N-word
that's right.
came about.
That's
I think
right.
it's a similar kind of thing.
There's just a guy on a horse, and he was being a Cossack, so they called him a Cossack. He was just raiding villages. Yep.
All right. So, what books would you recommend on history of religion? I've been reading a lot of Mircea Eliade. Is that how you pronounce that? I've never said that out loud before. Anyway, but he sounds like a lot worse of an anti-Semite than even Hitler. I mean, he spews ancient Roman views of the Jews and puts all the good things about Christianity on European heritage. I've read a little bit of like books like that are, you know, they try to talk about like this single primordial kind of religion that everything is kind of one and that it all ties together. Some of it's interesting. It's all pretty tenditious, though. I can recommend a series of books on the history of Islam specifically. I really like The Venture of Islam. It's a little bit dated. It was written in like the 60s or 70s, but I still think it's pretty much the best thing to go to, like just for like a big survey. It's kind of long. It's 3 volumes, and they're very detailed. But if you're looking for like, I want to know the history of Islam, I would definitely point you to that. It's worthwhile reading.
So my suggestion would be to maybe look at some of the medieval tracts against the Devil Mahound and the and other justifications for fighting against the demon Islam or something. So yeah.
Those are notoriously philo-Semitic, typically. Medieval text. I don't have suggestions.
Okay. If Jesus came back to Earth today, would he have a Patreon?
Would he have an OnlyFans?
Oh no. Yeah, I mean, that would be. Yeah, he could like. I feel like he might like create his own kind of thing, like maybe like a parallel.
His own
thing.
platform thing.
Yeah, and then
You think of him as a kind of tech entrepreneur?
Yeah, and it could be called like Saint Peteron or something.
That's good.
Yeah.
Hey Don, you dog. Retweet that tweet about the German troll academy that was closed by the Nazis for doing ironic racism instead of real racism. Not sure what they're talking about. Do you know what this is about, Don?
Yeah, so every few years there's well, not every few years, but every few months there's like a bunch of tweets about like how Nazis were doing research into, I mean not Nazis, but like Germans were doing research into one thing or another. Sometimes it's like trans stuff, sometimes it's like just general LGBT or women or whatever. Like it's just, anyways, it's like a meme. It just comes up every few months. And so I made a joke one that, and it's very, very murky because I don't know what the goal is. It's like maybe that there was going to be some sort of golden age of LGBT stuff happening in Germany and then the Nazis set it back or something, that like the research would get really advanced or something. I don't know if that, like, how much research really need into it, like at that basic kind of level for, like, you know, if you're worried about certain kind of hateful attitudes or whatever, then that's probably not the pivot point kind of thing, was this research institute in Berlin or wherever. And so anyways, I did a tweet that was basically like a troll academy got shut down in Germany because they were doing ironic racism instead of like Nazi racism.
That's pretty funny. Yeah, like what kind of research do you do exactly? Like, are you know, like what are you doing? Are you doing experiments? Are you doing like sociological things? I don't know.
Yeah, I think it's like something like the Institute for Genre Wissenschaft or something like that, or whatever. It was something like that, like gender studies or something. But I feel like it's one of those things where if you scratch the surface, it's like completely false. Just not even like, there's not even, you know, I don't know. It's just
yeah.
Careful there. Careful. Watch out.
As a Muslim, I believe that like keeping things in the original language is really important. And when you say that German stuff, that sounds really evil. So it seems like they did the right thing. That did not sound like a good place.
Okay.
Okay, next question is the purpose of Ramadan to hone Muslim psychic powers so that they may do jihad on the astral plane. In a sense, yes. The purpose of Ramadan is to develop taqwa, which is God consciousness, or the commonly used term in English that it isn't quite perfect. I think people have a bad connotation with it, but is like God-fearing, that kind of sensibility. So yeah, in a sense, but
you're getting
nothing
like
to worry about. It's all for good.
You're getting like mana points, XP points.
Yeah, it's kind of like how if you're in your own territory, you heal 20 points a turn, but if you're outside your territory, you only heal up 5 a turn. Ramadan is kind of like the 20 a turn.
I see. But then, you know, in the outside territory, you can use offensive spells.
Right.
You can actually fight them. You can actually kill them.
Exactly.
Good.
Yeah. So yeah, that's very perceptive. Good question. Have you ever smoked DMT? Thanks, Joe Rogan. Didn't know he was a listener. Have you guys ever smoked DMT? I assume Don has not. That doesn't seem like.
Yeah, no, I have not. Also, and I also should not be making any implicating statements over the radio waves.
Okay. Well, I haven't smoked the big DMT, like the N1 DMT N1 or whatever, but
Ooh.
I did once try 5-MeO DMT, which is some sort of. It's not supposed to be as heavy as the DMT, the regular DMT or something, and I didn't get much out of it. So.
Does the N2 DMT stand for what I think it stands for?
Oh yes, yeah, it does actually. Yeah, that's where they get it from too.
All right.
Okay, Don, what do you think about Christians like Hans Urs von Balthasar, or more recently David Bentley Hart, who propose that God's justice is ultimately restorative rather than retributive, and that eventually all people will be saved in the end? Tom, are there any universalist thinkers in the Muslim tradition?
I really like Balthasar's like writings, like a lot of it. I haven't read the one that is relevant to this in terms of like thinking that he says like, can we imagine, that all might be saved or something like that. I think he said something like that. And then I think that I think it's a nice idea. I don't know. It's one of those things where we had talked about this before, but it's like there's some sort of thing of consequences there, kind of thing of like, if you have freedom, then you have to have the freedom to just completely screw up, kind of thing, like to completely turn away. And if you don't have that freedom to do that, then it's all like just there's no consequences whatsoever. So then it's almost like if you know that eventually you're gonna get out of it no matter what you do, if you know it at like in a cynical way or something, then it's like, well, then why was there any consequences to start with then, or something like that?
Yeah, why not just create everyone already in heaven? Like, what's the point?
Yeah.
Yeah, so I'm not really versed in, like, I see my friends on Twitter who are Catholic talk about universalism and Jansenism, and I don't know if those things are even like at odds or related or whatever. But I do see these terms, and I'm not really familiar with them exactly, so I don't really know how to say yes or no to the idea of are there Muslims who kind of subscribe to those ideas. But in general, I would say that the standard, like the orthodox idea about this kind of idea of like people being saved, is it only just like kind of like the idea of people who get saved are that, first of all, in terms of Muslims and non-Muslims, it depends on the message being reached to you. So to whatever extent you've received the message of God and what God wants you to do, you're judged accordingly. So that's highly individualized to the point where you can't really determine it for each person, and people just don't even try. We talk about things in terms of like broad categories, and we can make general claims about this is this religion is true, this religion is not true, that kind of thing, but that doesn't necessarily mean anything about an individual. The other thing is that there are hadith that go to great extents to demonstrate how merciful and forgiving God will be on the day of judgment. I've mentioned this one before, but there's a hadith that talks about how God's mercy has 99 parts, and one of them has been reserved for earth. One of them has been given to earth between humanity and for the animals and like all of creation right now, and the others are all saved for the day of judgment. And then there's a pretty long hadith that talks about people who are initially entered into paradise, and then they want to go back and save people from hellfire, and then God lets them go back, and it kind of keeps going down levels in terms of how much faith they have. So it's like, go back and get people who have faith, go and get people who have a little bit of faith, and then it goes down to like an atom's worth of faith. So there is an idea of people being in hell but not permanently in hell, that you can be rescued out of hell. There's talk about people being able to rescue their family members and loved ones and things like that. I think I've also heard about the idea of like, and this is nice for me to hear as a convert, that if you convert, you're able to go back 10 generations to save people from your past and 10 generations. And, like that pious people are able to do that and that kind of thing. So the main thing I think to get out of that is that there's definitely a sense of, we talk about God's promise as being the promise of heaven. He makes certain promises to you that if you do good, if you have faith, if you believe, if you pray, blah, 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 if you do all these things, you will be rewarded. And that's just a promise that he will keep. But then there's a threat. And the threat is not a promise. It's not saying that if you do this sin, you will go to hell. It's a threat that he may send you to hell. So it's always in his court. Like, he can always just decide to forgive you anyways, and then that brings into question, like, well, look at how immense his forgiveness is, according to what we know about that. There's a really interesting essay that I read recently by one of my favorite scholars, Abdul Hakim Murad, that talks about kind of about these things, and it talks about the idea of what is it, like, how can we consider Islam to be, quote unquote, the true religion, and what does that mean in terms of people in other faiths, and how do we reconcile the idea of good people in other religions? If they're in a wrong religion, does that mean they're going to hell? And how do we think about this kind of stuff? I would like to talk about that on another episode, I think, at some point. So I'm not going to go into it at length, but yeah, maybe I'll link to it in the show notes, and so you can check it out if you're interested.
Sure.
Is there a set number of people that get saved? Is it like 14,400 or whatever, the Jehovah's Witnesses?
I don't think there is some hadith that talks something about that, but I can't remember it off the top of my head, and I don't know how authenticated it is either. It is said, though, that women outnumber men in paradise, but that women also outnumber men in hell. And if you look at the demographics, it kind of works out. So it's kind of like, well, there's just more women than men, so I guess that makes sense.
Do they have number 72-1, or what's the?
It doesn't say specifically.
Oh. I was always wondering how the demographics work out on that count.
Yeah. Let's see here. Okay, was the Soviet Union actually a planned economy? I've seen people reference it as a command economy. What's the difference between the two?
I think command is just a different way of saying it. It just means that they think that the main reason why people did things is because they were ordered to. Instead of, it's like, it's an economy structured around administrative demands instead of market incentives. That's just basically, it's a, also I think part of it is because in the mid century, calling things planning was just, everyone did that. Like it wasn't like, like the France would say that their economy was becoming, like indicative planning and that, like where markets had played a role, but then planning played another role. So I think that there's like overlap there. So that's part of it. It's just, it was more like a Western theory, this idea that the reason why things happened in the Soviet economy was because it was sort of like a hierarchy of different commands issued down that eventually got down to the worker. Yeah, I don't know. I feel like for most of the like say from high Stalinism to the 70s and 80s in Soviet Union, it was the government controlled pretty much most production and everything. So it's not like I'm kind of but I do think there was like underlying things going on that were moving towards being able to be easily converted into something that they could sell off. Like in the 80s, they started doing stuff like self-financing of companies, so that they had to buy, get orders from the general public instead of just from, they tried to shift away from state orders and stuff like that. So, but I don't know. I think that like, I used to be more interested in sort of the Maoist stuff that would kind of go into why the planned economy wasn't actually planned, and I don't know if that's. I feel like if you're splitting hairs at that level, like it's like something's wrong with the original theory, maybe. So yeah.
I think command economy, I'm not sure what the etymology of the term is, but it's one of those. I think it's a left communist term initially, but then it became kind of mainstream. I don't know, because they all like wanted a planned economy, but also like there would be like a variety of terms used in Trotskyism for what the Soviet economic system, and they were all like slurs or like things that are clearly that it's bad, that's a bad thing. So
yeah, I associate it more with like Western scholarship or something kind of thing than like say mainstream American conservative kind of thinking. So I'm not sure, but yeah, I know what you mean. That like I think of like bureaucratic collectivism or something for the Trotskyist kind of stuff, or something different things like
state
that.
Capitalism.
Yeah. State capitalism. Yeah. So. Okay.
All right. Did you guys see that alt-right figure Paul Joseph Watson has apparently converted to Islam? Well, Tom welcomed him with open arms. I haven't heard of this. Have you guys heard of this?
No.
Nope.
I think someone's trying to pull a fast one on me. But if it's true, yes, I would welcome him with open arms. And if he tries any that goofy ass, alt-right grifting stuff, he'll have a taste of my shoe. So.
Imagine my shock. He just says the Shahada accidentally. That's the guy, right? That's Paul Joseph Watson.
Yeah, that's him.
Imagine my shock.
All right. What does Don think about David Byrne's movie True Stories?
I have not seen it.
I haven't seen that either.
Nope.
Okay. So we love it. We think it's the best movie.
No,
Yeah.
terrible, awful.
I give it 3 stars so that split the difference.
There we go.
Yeah, I give 0 stars.
I'll give it 5. All right, guys. I think that'll do it for this episode. Thanks again for coming on, Ed. I hope that we were able to piss off all of our listeners with this one.
Yeah, big letters. Pyramid scheme. Bernie Sanders is a pyramid scheme.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. Thanks for coming on.
Thanks for having me.
All right, guys. If you enjoyed this episode and you like a second episode every week, you can subscribe to our Patreon. You will also get access to our Discord where you can chat with our community. And we'll catch you again next week. Thanks for listening.
Thanks, guys.
We love our cops, our law enforcement. We love our military, they're important. And when I'm in the jam, I know that I can call up the man with a plan. When I'm on the run, all I gotta do is dial 911. We love our cops, our veterans, they're important. We love our cops, our law enforcement. We love our veterans, they're important. And when they're out at war, you know I appreciate them more, Thank you, Lord, when they keep us safe, You know they make America a better